Hey, all you experts out there. This is the Monetize Your Expertise podcast, where we show you how to use your skills to pay the bills. Have you ever wanted to create a business that positions you as the industry leader and go-to expert? Join me every week to hear from amazing leaders and entrepreneurs who have successfully refined their skills in order to become experts and create extremely profitable knowledge businesses. To find all of the links and tools mentioned in this episode, just go to myepodcast.com. I'm your host, Grant Weherley, the online course guy, helping you every week to monetize your expertise. Hey, podcast listeners. In this episode, I sit down with my friend, Mike Harrington, bestselling author of Free Your Fear and all-around nice guy. I first met Mike about a year ago at a conference in Bangkok, and every time I chat with him, I can't get over how transparent and willing to share he is with his experiences, his strategies, and what he's figured out for success. So we talk about all kinds of strategies for launching and promoting books on Kindle, and specifically how he did this to become a bestseller. Hint, it's actually not that hard to do once you know how. He also offers you guys some pretty freaking sweet bonus materials for listening, so make sure to keep an eye out for those. Literally goes through exactly how he and his co-author tracked and promoted the crap out of their book to make it a #1 bestseller. So make sure to stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everybody, and thanks for joining me today. Today I feel very lucky to have Mike Harrington on with me on this call. Entrepreneur, bestselling author of Free Your Fear. Thanks for joining me today, Mike.
You are welcome, Grant. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, and I'm really excited to talk to you about your book, about what you're up to, about how you became a best-selling author. That's really exciting, and I think it's something a lot of people aspire to, but sounds like a massive obstacle. So first off, I'm curious, what led you to decide to initially write this book?
Totally by accident, if I'm being honest with you. I was speaking to someone that's in my mastermind group, and she had already published 6 or 7 different books on Amazon in the last year or so, 2 of which became bestsellers in a few different categories. And we were just kind of shooting the breeze. And she said, yeah, like I'm talking to a lot of people that I'm coaching or reaching out to for advice. And they're all like new entrepreneurs or want to start as an entrepreneur, but they're all just afraid. They're just afraid of this, afraid of that, afraid of failure, afraid of what people would say. And I'm like, based on like the limited amount of coaching I had done in the previous year, coaching other freelancers and entrepreneurs, like I heard that just over and over and over again, all these excuses. And then we're like, maybe we could do something here. So we agreed to get on like an hour-long kind of brainstorming call where we both had huge whiteboards behind us. We started writing out kind of ideas and keywords and concepts. And it kind of like took on a shape of its own. All of a sudden we had like 15 different ideas and sections. We're like, wait a second, this could be a book. And so we decided right there, like, all right, well, let's write a book about this. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I had not published a book yet. And here was already a best-selling author on Amazon who was basically inviting me to come along for the ride. It's like, who's not going to say yes to that, right? So that's kind of how we got started. I mean, it wasn't planned a year or so in advance. It kind of happened within a few weeks span of time.
Nice. But once it started to come together, you really seized it and turned it into something awesome. And so that's actually something I recommend a lot to people when it comes to creating courses, when it comes to creating content, books as well. It's a really great strategy to actually team up with somebody who's a little bit more knowledgeable than yourself, and especially if you're willing to do a little bit of the extra grunt work, and they're looking for somebody to just take care of that, and then you get to learn from them, you get to leverage maybe their credibility, their email list, their whatever, everything. And so that's really awesome that you did that and you found great success with that. And now the first book you published is a best-selling book. That's really exciting.
I should add that last year I wrote 2 other books and they'll never see the light of day. So this is actually
literally,
the third book.
You actually have 2 books you've never published.
Correct. And well, now that I'm a best-selling author, like I would be foolish to put these out because it would be kind of embarrassing. But I don't think anybody comes right out of the gate and writes a best-selling author their first time. I mean, like over the last year and a half plus, I've been writing every day. So it's not, and it wasn't even the goal of becoming a best-selling author. It's just like, I just want to get better at writing for blogging, writing content, et cetera. And the opportunity presented itself. So that's kind of a good argument for like, when you build a skill and you stick to a system, good things kind of seem to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You just got to put in the time, and it may not pay off instantly, but inevitably it will.
That's right.
And so I'm curious, because I know you co-wrote this book. So how did that work? What was the process of that? I haven't talked to somebody who's co-written a book, especially not this effectively before.
Dude, it was so easy. And the only reason it was so easy was because both of us are really technically savvy. Like we both run our own internet businesses and have to collaborate with clients and other people all the time. So it was like, all right, We've got Google Docs for all of our stuff. We've got our project management software. We've got email. We already had a designer in place. We had an editor in place. We had all these pieces, and then it was just a matter of putting together kind of the project timeline. So had I been working with just some super creative kind of airy-fairy person without like a systems background, like it would have been a nightmare. But because we both kind of brought those kind of more tech skills to the table in terms of launching stuff, it's pretty easy. Like there was not much hand-holding needed on either side, which was nice.
That's fantastic. So you said it was really easy to co-write the book. How difficult was it to actually publish the book once it was written?
Well, look, and let me answer about the writing part again. Like, so my co-author is also a writer. She writes every day. So getting into the groove of writing, it was no sweat for like me or her to easily to write 1,000 to 2,000 words per day because we're already in that habit. I mean, it's kind of like going to the gym. If I haven't been there in a year, I'm not going to be able to bench 200 pounds or whatever. But if I'm in there every day doing the squats and eating well and all that stuff, like you can do it. So if you team up with an absolute newbie, like you're going to run into problems. So that was, again, nice and easy. Again, that's a benefit maybe not everyone's going to have. But if you can work with someone more experienced than you, like you're going to have a better shot, I think. And to answer your question about like, was it about the publishing aspect or the kind of the pre-marketing that you just asked me?
So yeah, I was asking about, so how difficult did you find it to publish on Amazon? So it was a pretty easy process to write the book. How easy was it to actually publish the book once it was written?
So they've got certain parameters, and my co-author is definitely more of an expert than I am. But it's a matter of like having your cover design being the right specifications and pricing it a certain way, and kind of there's all these kind of guidelines you can abide by. But it's not rocket science. I mean, all this information is out there. Now that's just getting it on Amazon, getting it like marketed and like getting people to buy it and leave reviews and all that other stuff. That's a whole other ball of wax. And I'd actually say that's like, aside from the writing, I mean, if you're a pretty good writer, like that, you can do that kind of, I don't want to say no brainer, but it's not that hard. But the marketing part, like, man, there's so many pieces to that. And that's where I think most people forget. They think they can just make something great, like a book or a piece of art, and it's just going to sell or whatever. And marketing is not a dirty word. It's just a matter of getting the word out about something that you're creating that's good, that you believe in. So that was my biggest learning curve, is seeing how many moving parts there are like behind the scenes to create any kind of successful launch.
Yeah, and I think people oftentimes have a similar hang up when it comes to online courses as well. It's just like they focus on the creation of the content, or also blogging, actually anything related to creating something. They're like, I'm just going to make it really good and hope it sells.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work that way. It's usually like 80% marketing, 20% product.
That's right. It's absolutely right.
I'm curious, what was the number of books you had to sell to actually hit best-selling status? Or like the ballpark? I'm curious, just like the ballpark number.
I haven't even seen that number yet. Like, I'm getting sent that number from my co-author here. She's moving over to Thailand, I think close to where you are. And she's going to send me all of the stats. I mean, I could guess, but I don't want to tell you a lie. But I will say that, like, also like kind of like hard numbers aside, like you do need to hit. It's not just like a certain number of sales; it's a certain number of sales within, let's say, like the first 3 or 5 days. And don't quote me on this, but there's a whole kind of system behind it, which I've got access to. And then I made an infographic, which I think I shared with you, but I'm happy to share with your listeners as well, that kind of shows more in depth about not just the timeline for launching this stuff, but also like what you need in terms of reviews and sales and stuff. So that kind of gets more into that.
Yeah, man, I'd love to provide that for everybody. I've looked at it myself. It's really solid. So,
perfect.
So I think everybody would benefit from looking at that. So let me break it down for you. In terms of marketing, so you mentioned some things like like how you picked your topic and the title and the cover and pricing and things like that. What was your process for going from a whiteboard idea to a very specific topic and angle for the topic, to picking a title, to picking a cover? What was kind of the process behind all that?
Like I said earlier, we had one blank whiteboard, and we just started throwing out ideas of like stuff we had heard people say to us, and the complaining and like how they're talking about their fears and what's stopping them. So we put up quotes, we put up ideas, and we kind of started making a mind map of like how stuff fit together. And then we kind of came back to it and it's like, all right, well, this kind of plays into this, and this kind of works into this, and this would make a good section here. So it kind of morphs from kind of this nebulous mind map into more clearly defined sections. And then all of a sudden you have your chapter titles and you have an outline. So that's what we did. And as far as the title goes, we took the same approach that I take with writing a blog post, and that's I write the title or the headline at the very end. And that's because you have a nice skeleton and an idea that you're going to be writing about, but there's always going to be new twists and turns and things that you didn't foresee that actually could add a lot of value to the book. And so you kind of want to wait for that and see how it all kind of gels together at the end. So that's what we did. I mean, we knew it was going to be about fear, but we didn't know that it was going to feature like 10 great case studies and all this stuff. So it turned into an even better book than we thought. And that's why we didn't want to limit it up front with a title, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you've got the skeleton outline. You end up creating a title based on what that ends up turning into. How did you end up creating a really sexy cover for it and deciding on your price, launching strategy, and go from there?
Sure. I've got to give all the credit for the cover to my co-author, Lise. Left to my own apparently poor judgment, the cover would not have been that good. We had come up with, I think, 3 like semi-finalists for cover designs, and we tested it in not just like on our early opt-in email list for the book, but also in a couple of different like Facebook Kindle launch groups, and kind of crowdsourced it really. So we crowdsourced like we got the title kind of tightened up, the tagline, and then also the color and the background image. So we figured with Freeing Your Fear, like a dude leaping off a cliff was kind of a good image for that. So that seemed to play well with people, and the light blue people seemed to like. I was partial to red, but apparently that's a big no-no on book covers, at least if you want the book to like have kind of a positive spin to it. So
interesting.
Away from red.
It's really interesting with the coloring. I didn't know that. It's funny, by the way, we should probably put in a little disclaimer. Your book does not encourage people to jump off cliffs.
No, it doesn't. It's a metaphorical cliff.
Okay. Just so we got that in there, so nobody ends up being like, oh, but I listened to this audio and then decided to go jump off a cliff, because apparently that's what best-selling authors do.
Oh God, no! Please don't do that.
So you mentioned having an early adopter kind of opt-in list before you launched the book. So can you describe the strategy behind that?
Yeah. So basically, we drove interest through not just our existing email list, but also through various masterminds and other kind of influential people that we wanted to read the book. And so anyone who opted into that early list, they got a free copy of the book. And this was before it was actually released on Amazon. So this is it's kind of an exclusive deal. And that really kind of drove interest and intrigue. I mean, who doesn't want to be the first one to read a book before it's even put out, So that did pretty well for us. And then in addition to that, which is kind of another piece of the pre-marketing, we got the book into the hands of maybe like 10 or so really influential people. Some of them, and this is a really good secret and a good tip that we learned, is that if you feature really good case studies of people in your book, they are going to help you promote it because they're in the book, right? So we got the book into the hands of those people, obviously, and some other influential people that featured us on their blog or podcast. And that's kind of what you do before you like do your big official launch. You do this soft launch to get kind of build up your initial buzz around it.
Yeah, it's a really great strategy, especially with the case study component. I think that's a really good strategy that I think most people can use, regardless of their industry. So aside from that, though, I'm curious what your process was for getting it in front of influencers that were not actually featured in your book. How did you go about that?
Yeah, so that came down to some paid masterminds that I'm in. And this, I always harp on this whenever I coach somebody, whenever I write about how important it is to pay to play, because you're getting access to a much higher caliber of people. And that it's kind of like the barrier to entry, if you will. So when we put out the word that we were going to be launching this book, people were interested, right? And so we got it into their hands, and like they were happy to give us kind of an editorial review. Some of these people, we didn't even plan on this, but happened to be like, I happen to be the editor of Fire Pole Marketing, so we got featured on there as a blog post leading up to the launch, and a few other sites and podcasts. So when you put out the word like that, and also if you have a good reputation from helping other people and putting out value before, which I had because I put an emphasis on that, then when it's your time to put something out, those people want to help you, and if they have a connection, they have someone they can introduce you to, then they do it, and that's kind of how it worked. So that's kind of the big lesson of how important relationship building is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's
totally not related to this, but it actually totally is. It's related to everything.
Exactly. I think you just nailed it. It's related to everything, and it's the best way to take things to the next level in your business, regardless of your industry or where you're at. So just to dig into the nitty gritty a little bit, like how did you actually frame that? How did you post that within those groups when you were initially trying to get the word out?
Interesting. So I think I actually asked for help. It's funny, like when you ask for help, a lot of people will actually help you. Yeah, I think I said like, "Hey, we're writing this book, and here's what it's about, and like we're trying to get some people to read it." And like people were like, "Yeah, that's really cool." And I just said, "Hey, like, does anybody know like where this might be a good fit? Like, on a guest post, on a blog, on a podcast, whatever." And a few people chimed in. They said like, "Oh, like I just happen to work over at Firepole, or I happen to know Sean Ogle, or whatever." And it kind of took off from there. So when you have that relationship capital already built up, then those kind of things, those doors open when you ask for them.
Nice. The ROI of social capital. It's good stuff.
You know it. You know it.
Awesome. So what was the timeline for your book launch in terms of the pre-launch, the launch, how long it took for you to become a bestseller after your launch? If you remember, I'm curious what the timeline of all of that looked like.
When I coach other people and people ask me for our process, I tell them it was about 90 days. And that's not possible for everybody, but for people that do write on a consistent basis, it is. And I think to hit that number, like we had to have the first draft done in maybe a little over a month. But if you're writing 1,000 words a day and you have 2 people writing, you're gonna hit that mark. And so from there, then it was while we're writing, of course, we're pre-marketing, right? We're getting the word out, landing the case studies, right? Getting the reviews from those people, getting the first edits done, getting like the first iterations of the cover design done. So all this stuff is happening. It's not like blocked off. Like all these things are kind of overlapping. And that's where I got to give props again to my co-author. I mean, she's gone through this gauntlet before. So she had a system in place. She had the timeline like, all right, this is going to happen. Then this is going to happen. Then this is going to happen. And man, dude, like I'm realizing the power of deadlines are so huge. And that's why I think so many people fail to like, not just launch a book, but to launch like anything, whether it's a blog post or a course or anything else, is that they don't have a hard deadline or other people like kind of have an expectation of them. And in my case, my co-author has an expectation of me finishing. The editor is waiting for us. The guest blog, and we're going to do the podcast interview. So we have all these people waiting for us. So you kind of in a way, you paint yourself into a corner, but that's a good thing because otherwise you can just put it off forever.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I also try and use that strategy as well. And there's like a pro and a con. So the pro is that it definitely forces you to stay on track. The con is it becomes really stressful, especially if you end up procrastinating and are getting close to the deadline.
Yes, it does. And actually a counterpoint to that is you make little, like smaller deadlines and milestones along the way. So it's not like, oh, hey, like here's my 20,000 words. It's my part of the book. It's like, no, every week, here's my 5,000 words or whatever. So, and like checking in constantly with the co-author. So when you have smaller deadlines, then it basically makes it impossible to procrastinate. So systems, man, you got to have a system.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of systems. It makes everything easier.
Yes.
And seamless. And yeah, it's the only way to, aside from networking and social capital, right? It's the only way to take things to the next level. Leverage yourself.
Exactly. I mean, and this idea, especially with creative stuff like writing a book, what really like just kind of turns my stomach and knots is when I hear someone say, "Oh, well, I just wait to write until I'm inspired, right? Until I feel like I have the time." It's like, do you wait to go to the gym to like feel inspired because you're going to be fat, not out of shape? If you do that, it's the same thing, man. It's the exact same thing. It's not always sexy. And you don't always want to do it, but it builds the momentum. And I don't know. I could preach on that forever, but yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Discipline, people. Discipline. And actually, no, I read there's this book about like morning rituals of like artists and writers and creative types and stuff. I think it's just called Rituals. But anyways, it was really interesting to read about all the authors. And there were a couple that said that they just kind of like waited around to become inspired. But the vast majority of them are actually like, especially the ones that were great, that like published tons of books, that were really successful. They were like, I write 4,000 words first thing upon waking up, no matter what. Even if it's total shit and I throw it away. It was that kind of discipline that caused success for most of those writers, which I found really, really interesting.
Yeah. And that's something I just started doing like in the last 5 to 6 months. And this is actually like a piece of advice I wish someone had given me a long time ago. So I'm going to share it right now with your listeners. And that is, if you have, let's say you have a full-time job, or maybe you're already working for yourself and you're freelancing, you have clients, consulting clients, whatever. The mistake I was making was that I would, first thing in the morning, I wake up, shower, have my coffee, crack open my laptop, and check my email. And what's that do? That immediately puts me like in reactionary mode of like, oh shit, my client wants this, or I got to do that. well, I'll just start doing that now. And I wasn't doing any of my stuff first. So it's like all this short-term stuff that's paying the bills, but none of my stuff that's going to build my longer-term business. Like in my case, writing a book, building up my website, building my email list. Right. So I was essentially paying everybody else first. And then if I still had any energy left over, then I'd write or do something creative. But now what I do is I don't take any calls before noon. I don't check my email before 11 a.m. And I spend the first 3 hours strategizing and writing. And I write anywhere from 1,500 words to 2,000 words a day, and I don't miss a day. And just like you said, some of it can be crap. A lot of it is crap. But I save it because some of that crap sometimes will fit a different post or idea that I want to do later. So I leave them in what I call the graveyard of dead ideas. But sometimes they can be resurrected, so I leave them there.
Nice. And I'm sure it gets the brain juices flowing and might inspire something great, even if the initial version's crap.
That's right.
So how long does that actually take you to do? 2,000 words a day? Sounds like a lot.
Yeah. Dude, well, when I started last year with a coach, and I wasn't writing at all, he's like, okay, well, you're going to start with 250 words a day. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound like a lot. And I would get there and write a sentence or two. I'm like, oh, I don't have anything to talk about. Like, who wants to listen to me, right? You have all that stuff in your head stopping you. And it's just like lifting weights, just like running, like now it's like, I don't even blink an eye. Like within 15, 20 minutes, I can bang out 1,500 words because I've already got, not only am I in practice, but I've got a bunch of ideas, let's say 30, 40, 50 different ideas, headlines or concepts that I've written in my Evernote, and I can just bring one of those up and bam, just start writing. Whereas before I didn't have any of that in place. So
that's insanely impressive, by the way. 1,500 words in 20 minutes, ridiculous.
Well, here's the thing. I learned this from the author of Fight Club, Chuck something. I forget his last name. What he did, and this is what most successful writers do, is like they give themselves constraints, the power of constraints. So he would either set an egg timer for 20 minutes, or I think in his case, he did something weird, like he'd set the dryer, like the dryer would only go for 20 minutes or whatever. And like that was his cutoff. And that was all the writing he was going to do for the morning or for the entire day. So if he didn't get it in then, that was it. And it's amazing, like what you can do when you know that there's a deadline and there's a timer coming. You stop wasting time and you just get to it. So I don't know. I think it's just a matter of discipline. I know people think discipline is kind of a dirty word, but I haven't seen anybody succeed without it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's absolutely essential. And you listen to people who become truly great at something or accomplish something like becoming a best-selling author or whatever. And it's like, it's so rare that it happens by chance, right? Like it might appear that way, but it's interesting to think about the lead up, right? Like how you've been writing for quite a while now and how that led to the success, but the work was necessary on the front end. You didn't just wake up one day and said, hey, I'm going to become a best-selling author today.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny how that works. I didn't even think about that till you brought it up. It's like, I don't even question that it's a part of my day now. It's just part of who I am. And is the goal to be like a best-selling author again and be known just as an author? Like, probably not. I'm going to be doing other stuff, but the writing, I mean, this is kind of get a little bit meta for you here, but like when you write, like your thinking gets clearer and better, and you come up with more creative solutions to not just what you're writing about, but also your business and your life and stuff. I think it makes you a better thinker.
Yeah, but so what actually caused you to start writing in the first place that consistently in that habit? Like, did you have the concept that you were going to become an author, or was it for your blog, or was it just like for yourself?
It was for the blog, mostly for the blog. I mean, I saw these other bloggers that I was inspired by. Like, man, I want to be like them, and I want to have an audience, and I want to like inspire other people, blah, blah, blah. And I started working with a coach, and this was another guy that was blogging, and he was having pretty decent success. And he's like, you got to have a daily practice. You got to do it every day. And it doesn't matter how much you do to start with. Start with 250 words, but what happens is you build a momentum. And if you break the chain, if you don't do it for 3 days or 4 days or whatever, like when I've skipped a few days, dude, I feel it. Like I get to the keyboard and I'm like, I got nothing. Whereas if you do it every day, you show up and you're like, you got all these ideas that are kind of percolating in your head because you've been writing about them, and you just kind of hit the ground running. You just don't break that chain, and like the momentum, man, like it kind of takes over in a weird way.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I can see that makes lots of sense. And actually, I might start trying this as well. Like for me, I tend to go for the process of like go all in on one very specific project for like a crazy manic kind of temporary time window and then go on to the next thing. But yeah, that's also not very organized or sustainable at all times. This would be an interesting routine to try out. So I might try this myself.
Yeah.
So actually, a quick disclaimer for people who are listening. There's a lot of great content, a lot of great tips that we've talked about already. But in terms of application for people listening, I just want to point out that this is kind of the approach to become a specific kind of writer and publish a specific kind of book, which requires a specific kind of investment. So a lot of people listening might be most interested in sort of quickly publishing some books based on some existing content. For example, translating an online course into an ebook, partially for marketing purposes, but also just to kind of boost the passive income. And so obviously that kind of approach, the goal for that is not quite as ambitious as becoming a best-selling author. And so the work leading up to it would be less. And so, because it sounds like this was, you had to put in quite a bit of effort to accomplish this goal, right?
Yeah.
The lead up, the practice writing, the launch stuff. But of course, if your goals are lower, then the process can be quite a bit simpler.
I would 100% agree with that. And I'd say if you're on the other side of the spectrum, and let's say you have a super popular blog or whatever, and maybe you're not a best-selling author, but you've got a list of 10,000 people or 15,000 people, whatever, you don't even need to be an Amazon bestseller to sell that book well, because you've already got people interested in what you're doing. But that's kind of the exception. If you get to that point, then Amazon is kind of a nice addition, but it's actually like not your main driver, So, but for everyone starting out, I mean, you can't go wrong with Amazon. I mean, that's where you get your first kind of hint of credibility, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you get to the next level, you can become your own Amazon.
There you go. Yeah.
So when you were promoting your book, so I've talked to some other authors, and some of them, for example, use some paid promotional tools or submitted their book through various like book offering directories like BookBooks and Bucky Books. I don't know. There's a list of them that I've heard that are pretty common that a lot of authors use. So what are some tools that you used, if any, free or paid, to promote the book or to get it listed in various places?
Yeah. So we've got a whole like black book of, I think it's not a book, it's actually like an Excel spreadsheet of the different sites that we used. Some were paid, a lot of them were free, and we kind of tracked the performance of those. That list is way too long to like kind of rattle off here. So we did that. Also, we ran some Facebook ads. Amazon runs Facebook ads through stuff like once people have already looked at it, and you probably know that. But we ran some of our own Facebook ads as well. So it was a multi-pronged approach for sure. It wasn't, just gunning for one site. We made sure we were everywhere.
Nice. And so the Facebook ads you ran, were they on the front end or were they retargeting? Or
they were on the front end.
And you actually found that was profitable?
From what I saw initially, yes.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And don't ask me what the spend was, because that's stats that I'm still waiting on from my co-author. But I mean, I looked at kind of the post game that we did and said, yeah, like she said, we got an ROI from that. Like if we do it another launch, we'll definitely do that.
That's awesome. And so how did that mesh in with the pricing strategies of like, obviously when you launch a book, a lot of times you give away for free and then make it 99 cents and then go through that sort of tier thing. So at what point did you actually run the Facebook ads?
If I remember correctly, this is getting kind of nitty gritty. If I remember correctly, we started running those once it bumped up to $2.99. I wish I could be like 100% certain on that, but that's the best of my recollection.
Yeah, well, that would make sense, because I think it would be very difficult to have profitable, Facebook ads at $1.
Yes.
That would be really challenging. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the counterpoint to that is you could say, well, I'm paying for these Facebook ads up front, and it's getting my book up the ranks, getting more reviews, and that will mean more sales kind of on the long tail, right?
Yeah.
But that's a little harder to. It's like, how are you gonna quantify that up front? You can't, right?
Exactly. And so you're actually to kind of go into the details of the pricing strategy. So you did go with the typical free window, followed by 99 cents, followed by $2.99, followed by $5.99, and then from there. How did that look?
Yep, that's exactly right. I mean, we went exactly with that sequence. I mean, it's in the infographic I'm going to share with you, but it'll say exactly like 1 week out, or first 3 days this, and then this, and then this. So yeah, they can see that in there.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's nice that you got a formula that's easily replicable.
Yeah.
And so do you think any of these strategies that you've used are somewhat dependent on your market, or like the topic of your book? Because it's a very specific topic or market that you're addressing, that you're reaching out to. People looking to become entrepreneurs. So I imagine if you were targeting dentists or something, like it would be a totally different game, or would it?
Yeah.
Or would the same strategies work?
I think a lot of the same strategies work. I mean, I think if you go to the niche, I mean, entrepreneurs, you're going to find a lot of them online. Dentists and more like people kind of in the quote unquote professions. I've spoken to some guys that have written books for that particular niche, and it sounded like what they did to kind of build even more buzz and credibility was like they would physically go to like the conventions and the industry shows or whatever where these people hang out. So if I were to do that, we had the budget and the time, I'd probably include that as well. And like, you know, whether you're speaking for free at one of these events or whatever, I mean, anything to get the word out. I haven't done that personally, but I've talked to other people that have had success doing it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've heard similar things as well to going to the in-person events, like giving away business cards with a free copy on a specific date kind of thing, like before you actually launch your book, when it's relevant and things like that. I've also heard of some interesting strategies where you gift the book to people who attend a conference that you give some kind of talk at, and you gift a book to everyone in the audience or something along those lines, or you get the organizer of the event to sponsor that, or all kinds of really interesting things like that to go more old school, more in person, but still really, really quite effective and also large scale, right?
Well, that's the thing. And like, I think that's where a lot of new internet entrepreneurs kind of, and myself included, when I started, like, is a little short-sighted. We think, I can just hide out behind my MacBook Pro and like sip my coconut drink or sip my Starbucks coffee and like, I'll make my millions or whatever. But you notice the people that do the best, the people that really break out are the people that, like we said, they build relationships and they build them in person. It's so important because that's what really builds the trust. And then from there, yeah, you can build really thriving internet businesses and launch stuff, books, courses, whatever. But old school face-to-face relationships, man, like they still count for a lot, I think.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I can say it's a bit of a challenge from Thailand sometimes. I have to skip to Skype a lot, but
I hear you. I mean, I was over there for a month or so last year, and not only was it hard to like build relationships, but I was like almost losing clients because I couldn't get on the right, time frame as them, being, 14 hours apart or whatever. So yeah, it's a challenge. Trade-off.
Exactly. Traveling entrepreneur problems.
Exactly.
Nice, man. So if you had to start over from scratch, like knowing what you know now, knowing from your existing experiences, when you had to like come up with a new book, a new topic, and sort of go from scratch, what would you do differently this time? How would you get started? How would you ensure that you're successful again?
Okay. Well, obviously you never have any 100% guarantee of success, but there's plenty of things you can do to kind of stack the deck in your favor. And I'd say the first is doing your market research. And I don't mean by like doing all these technical surveys with numbers and all this crap. I mean talking to people, right? So if you have a network, let's say you've got a mastermind or you're part of some Facebook groups or you attend events or whatever, and you're thinking these are the type of people I want to write something for. What kind of problem can I solve for them? Well, instead of like trying to come up with it in your head, like out of the ether, go talk to people, right? And ask them questions. Ask them like, what are they struggling with? Like, are they struggling with X, Y, Z? And then not only are you having ideas, but you can hear directly from your potential readers. They're telling you like in their own language what they are looking for. And you can use that. What you write about, you can use that in the sales copy and all that stuff. So that's super valuable. And then another tactic, which some insiders know, I don't know if everybody does, is go to Amazon itself, look at the other books that are doing well in the category, the niche that you want to write for, and then don't just copy them. Go to the reviews section, look at like what they did well, but even more importantly, look at what they did poorly. Like, like the 1 and 2 star reviews, what did they think was left out? What could have been improved? And then you be the guy that writes the book with those improvements, So that's what I would do next time. That's a big one.
It's funny how similar everything you just said is to exactly about creating online courses. It's actually almost exactly the same.
I think marketing is marketing, man. Like you don't make it up in a bubble. You actually figure out what people want and they need, what they're struggling with, and then you give it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing is, I guess once you learn the skill set, the general process for how to do that with one type of product, then the skill set applies almost exactly the same in a lot of different product types, a lot of different industries. It's a process that you can kind of go through almost the exact same way.
Yeah.
With some slight tweaks in those other areas. And so that's really, really valuable.
Very cool.
So what's next for you? What are you working on now? Where are you going to go next with all of your awesome bestseller-ness?
Is that a word? Well, I guess we'll make it.
It is. Yeah, I'm patenting it today.
So I'm kind of taking a page out of your playbook, and that is one thing I've always loved to do since I've been working for myself is I like to figure out how to do something, figure out how to do it well, and then teach to other people. And that's your bread and butter with doing courses.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I want to do here. And so that's like everyone that's bought our book, but more importantly, everyone that has reached out to me and opted into my email list to get this infographic that I'm going to share with you. These are all people that want to publish their own book, but for whatever reason, there's something stopping them. They don't know how to market it. They don't know how to build a system to write it and all this stuff. I'm going to build kind of a mini coaching practice around writing and launching a book with everything we've talked about here, and then take that kind of like learning and progress that people have and turn that into more of a tangible kind of scalable course. So that's what I really want to do. And that's kind of the longer term goal right now. And we're figuring out how that's going to look. Because one interesting stat I want to share with you, which I should have said up front, but this is really interesting. Apparently a survey was done a couple of years ago in the United States, and of adults surveyed, 82% of Americans said that they have a goal of writing and publishing a book in their lifetime.
Wow.
Right? That's incredible. And the number of people that will actually do it, I think it was 1 or 2%. Right?
Well, the 81% go to you then.
Well, if exactly. If you ask me, that's a nice market to be in, and I want to share what I've learned. So, who wouldn't want to publish a book? I mean, that's kind of a big thing, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and how I can help other people do kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And honestly, I know I have a couple other entrepreneur friends who do kind of similar things and kind of serve a similar market, and they're really successful with it. And I think it's something that's huge and hugely profitable. And honestly, it's a big need because it's kind of a similar idea behind what I do a lot of times. Is I oftentimes work with people who they have some kind of knowledge or experience or skill set, and they can figure out how to turn it into some kind of content. They can probably put it into some kind of effective book, some kind of effective course. But that's not really the hardest part, right? It's 80% marketing, 20% product. And so the actual packaging of it and selling of it, that's the real hard part, and the part that most people get stuck somewhere along the lines of creating something, and then they get stuck, they hit that wall, they're not really sure how to make it actually sell, make it actually profitable. And that applies to both courses and books for people who have an ambitious goal for creating a high-end book, a bestseller along those lines.
Yeah.
They have the same problem, right?
Yeah, they do. And I think, this is actually kind of a mini plug for the book about fear. Like a lot of people, yours truly included, we'll take a project we're super excited about, passionate about, and then we get to like the 10-yard line, to use a football analogy, and then the fear takes over. It's like, oh, if I put this out there, like, what if it's horrible? What if nobody likes it? What if it doesn't make any money? What if I look stupid? And that's stopped, dude. How many half-written novels or 90% written novels and screenplays are sitting in people's desks at home? I'm guessing a lot. Right. And so that's where not only the system, but also like knowing that the system is in place to kind of get you out of your own way and to like act in spite of the fear. So it's as much an internal game as it is an external game in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. And I think you're really going to help people and be in a great position to help the next wave of best-selling authors out there.
I hope so, man. That's the plan.
Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today and taking the time to help share some of your expertise and your strategies that helped you become so successful recently. And if people want to check out your book or if they want to check out your blog or anything along those lines, where would you direct people?
So you can just go to Amazon, search Free Your Fear, and it'll come up as the first listing. You can also check me out at mikeharrington.net. That's my personal blog. And then you can also get access to the infographic that I mentioned there. You can opt into the list and grab a hold of that. So those are the two best ways to find out more.
Cool, guys. Well, everybody go check that out. I highly recommend everything that Mike does. Good stuff. And I hope you learned a lot today. And above all else, take action on what you learned today. Because again, kind of as we talked about earlier, you can learn a lot, but it's actually taking action and putting in the time and building the good habits. And that's what will cause you to do awesome stuff.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome, Grant. Talk to you soon.
Hey, entrepreneurs and experts, I just wanted to thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you learned at least one new big idea that helps you evolve your skills and gets you closer to monetizing your expertise and creating that successful knowledge business. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes and Stitcher, and check out myepodcast.com for all episodes as well as the tips and tricks mentioned in this episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.